You see her every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Same parking lot, same struggle with too many bags. But this time, something made you stop. Something made you walk over. Let me help you with those 4 words that would change everything. She looked up, startled. Her eyes were tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying more than just groceries. You grabbed the heaviest bags without asking twice. The milk, the canned goods, the weight she shouldn't be lifting alone. The walk to her car felt like a mile. Each step echoed in the empty parking lot. She moved slowly, carefully. You matched her pace. No rush, no impatience, just presence. "Thank you," she whispered, fumbling for her keys. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, from something deeper. You loaded the trunk in silence. Sometimes words aren't necessary. Then she turned to face you, really face you. And what she said next stopped time itself. "Young man, do you know who I am?" You shook your head. Should you? Was she someone famous? Someone important? The questions raced through your mind, but you stayed quiet. "I own this supermarket chain, all 47 stores across 3 states. The words hung in the air like suspended disbelief. This woman in her worn coat and simple shoes. This woman struggling with grocery bags. She owned everything you could see and more. But that wasn't the real surprise. The real surprise was what came next. What she pulled from her purse, what she pressed into your hand, what would spiral into a story you'd tell for the rest of your life. Sometimes the universe disguises angels as ordinary people. Sometimes wealth wears humility like a second skin. Sometimes a simple act of kindness opens doors you never knew existed. This is that story, your story. The day, 4 words and 5 minutes changed the trajectory of your entire existence. She held your gaze for a moment that stretched into eternity. Her eyes weren't just looking at you. They were seeing through you, into you, past every wall you'd built, past every disappointment that made you stop believing in miracles. "I've been coming here every Tuesday for 3 years, she continued. "Same time, same struggle. Hundreds of people have walked past me, employees, customers, even my own managers." The weight of her words settled on your shoulders. How many times had you walked past someone who needed help? How many opportunities had you missed because you were too busy, too distracted, too absorbed in your own world? But you stopped. You saw me. Not the owner, not the boss. Just an old woman who needed help. You wanted to say it was nothing, that anyone would have done the same, but you both knew that wasn't true. In a world that rewards looking up, you had looked around. In a culture that celebrates climbing ladders, you had bent down to lift someone else's burden. She reached into her purse again. This time she pulled out a business card. Not the glossy, impressive kind executives usually carry. This one was simple, elegant, just her name and a phone number. "I want you to call this number tomorrow at exactly 9 a.m. Can you do that?" You nodded, still processing, still trying to understand what was happening. The card felt heavier than it should, like it carried the weight of possibility itself. Right now, as you're reading this, I need you to understand something crucial. Every single day, you pass by opportunities disguised as inconveniences. Every single day, you choose between being too busy and being human. What would happen if you chose differently? What doors might open if you simply stopped to help? Subscribe to this channel if you believe in the power of unexpected moments, because what happened next will shake everything you thought you knew about success, kindness, and the invisible threads that connect us all. "Remember," she said, getting into her car, 9 a.m. sharp. Your life is about to change, but not in the way you think. The engine started. The car pulled away. You stood there in the empty parking lot, holding a business card that felt like it might spontaneously combust. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. But when it did, it would bring revelations that would rewrite your entire understanding of what it means to truly see people. That night, you couldn't sleep. The business card sat on your nightstand, practically glowing in the darkness. Margaret Chen. That was her name. Simple, unassuming. You'd Googled her, of course. Nothing came up. If she really owned 47 stores, she'd kept herself invisible. A ghost in her own empire. 3 a.m. You were still awake, still thinking. What kind of billionaire carries her own groceries? What kind of CEO struggles alone in a parking lot? The questions multiplied like cells dividing, each one spawning 2 more. Your apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. Everything you'd accepted about life, work your job, pay your bills, keep your head down, suddenly felt like a cage you'd built yourself. One simple act had cracked everything open. You thought about your mother, how she used to say, "The universe is always talking, baby. Most people just forgot how to listen." You'd rolled your eyes back then, young, arrogant, certain that success meant something you could measure in dollars and square feet. But Margaret Chen had just whispered something in the universe's language, and for the first time in years, you'd heard it, felt it. That electric sensation when destiny brushes against your ordinary life and leaves sparks. The clock moved like molasses, each minute stretching into hours. You made coffee at 5 a.m. Showered at 6, put on your best shirt, the one you saved for interviews and funerals, because somehow this felt like both. By 8:45, you were sitting in your car outside a Starbucks. The business card trembled in your hand, not from fear, from anticipation, from the absolute certainty that whatever happened next would divide your life into before and after. 8:59. Your phone was ready. The numbers already dialed, just waiting for that final digit, that final moment, that final breath before the plunge. Sometimes life gives you a countdown to your own transformation. Sometimes you get to watch the seconds tick away before everything changes. Most people would call it anxiety, but you knew better. This was awakening. This was the universe clearing its throat before it spoke your new name. 9 a.m. You pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, a voice answered that would haunt your dreams and fuel your purpose for years to come. But it wasn't Margaret Chen. It wasn't who you expected at all. "Hello," the voice said. "I've been waiting for your call for 3 years." 3 years? And the words tumbled out before you could stop them. Your mind raced. How could someone wait 3 years for a call from a stranger? How could they know you'd even call? "My name is David Chen. Margaret is my mother. She told me about you, about what you did yesterday." His voice was measured, careful, like someone holding fragile glass. "I don't understand. You're not supposed to. Not yet." "Can you meet me in 1 hour? Corner of 5th and Main, the old brick building with the blue door." The line went dead. No goodbye, no explanation, just coordinates and a timeline. You sat there, phone still pressed to your ear, listening to the silence that follows life-changing conversations. 57 minutes later, you stood before a building that looked forgotten by time. The blue door was faded, paint peeling like old skin. No signs, no indication of what waited inside. Your hand hesitated on the doorknob. Last chance to walk away. Last chance to choose ordinary. You turned the handle. Inside was nothing like the exterior suggested. Modern, pristine, walls lined with photographs, hundreds of them, all showing different people, different moments, but something connected them, something you couldn't quite grasp. Each photo represents someone who stopped to help. David's voice came from behind you. You turned to find a man in his 40s, kind eyes carrying the same depth as his mother's. 3 years ago, my mother started a test, a challenge, really. She wanted to find people who could see beyond surfaces. The room suddenly felt alive with stories, each photograph a life changed, each frame a moment when someone chose kindness over convenience. But one wall remained empty, waiting. Why? It was all you could manage. David smiled, that same knowing smile his mother had worn. Because my mother built an empire on a simple principle. Success means nothing if you lose your humanity getting there, but she's getting older. The company needs new blood, new vision, but not just anyone. If you're watching this right now, feeling like your life is ordinary, like your choices don't matter, I need you to hear this. Every single day, you're writing your story with the smallest decisions. Every act of kindness is a vote for the person you're becoming. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because what David said next will completely redefine what you think success looks like. She needs someone who sees people, not positions. Someone who helps without calculating return on investment. Someone who understands that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. And you think I'm that person because I carried some groceries? David walked to the empty wall, ran his hand across its surface. Tell me something. What did you think about last night after meeting my mother? The question caught you off guard, but you answered honestly. Told him about the sleepless night, the questions, the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more certain with each word. That's why you're here, he said finally. Because you didn't think about reward. You thought about meaning. You thought about the kind of person you want to be. He pulled out an envelope, thick, official. My mother wants to offer you something. But first, you need to understand what you're really being asked to join. This isn't just a job, it's a revolution in how business gets done. The envelope felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. You didn't open it. Not yet. Something told you that once you did, there would be no going back. David watched you, patient as stone, understanding written across his features. Before you open that, he said, let me show you something. He led you deeper into the building, through hallways that seemed to defy the structure's modest exterior, past doors marked with names you didn't recognize, until you reached a room that took your breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, but that wasn't what stopped you cold. It was the wall of letters. Thousands of them, handwritten, some in crayon, some on expensive stationery, all telling stories. Every person in those photographs wrote one of these letters, David explained, about what happened after they were noticed, after someone saw their humanity instead of their circumstances. You moved closer, started reading. A single mother who'd been given a job when she helped an elderly man with his shopping. A teenager who'd received a scholarship after stopping to fix a stranger's flat tire. Story after story of lives transformed by simple acts of kindness. My mother started this after my father died. David's voice grew soft. He was a janitor, worked in an office building for 30 years. Invisible to everyone except her. She was a junior executive then, but she saw him, really saw him, learned from him, fell in love with his wisdom, his kindness, his way of seeing beauty in mundane things. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about business. This was about rewriting the rules of how we see each other, how we value each other, how we lift each other. When he died, she promised to build something different. A company that would see the invisible, reward the kind, elevate the humble. It took her 40 years, but she did it. You picked up one letter, a child's handwriting. Thank you for seeing my daddy. Now he smiles when he comes home. The words blurred as your eyes filled. How many people walk through life unseen? How many brilliant minds are trapped in invisible bodies? How many hearts break from being looked through instead of looked at? Open the envelope, David said gently. Your hands trembled as you broke the seal. Inside wasn't what you expected. No job offer, no salary numbers, just a single question written in Margaret's careful script. What would you do with the power to see people? Below it, an invitation, not to a job, to a journey, to spend 6 months learning every aspect of the company, from the stockroom to the boardroom, from the parking lot to the executive suite, to understand how an empire built on kindness actually works. There's no salary during training, David explained, but all expenses are covered. And at the end, if you truly understand what we're building here, you'll be offered a position that doesn't exist yet, one we'll create together based on what you discover. Your mind reeled. 6 months, no guarantees, everything uncertain except the feeling in your chest that this was why you were alive. This was why you'd stopped in that parking lot, not for a job, for a calling. "I need to warn you," David continued, "this isn't easy. Seeing people, really seeing them, will break your heart 1,000 times, but it will also rebuild it stronger each time. You'll question everything. You'll want to quit. You'll wonder if kindness can really scale to empire size." "And can it?" you asked. David smiled, that same knowing smile. "That's what you're here to help us figure out. My mother built the foundation, but the future, that needs fresh eyes, young hearts, people who still believe the world can be different." You looked back at the letter in your hand, at the question that would define everything that came next. What would you do with the power to see people? The answer was already forming, already pushing against your ribs, already demanding to be born into the world. You just needed the courage to speak it. Yes, the word left your mouth before your brain could interfere, before doubt could creep in, before the practical voice that had governed your life could list all the reasons this was insane. David's expression didn't change, like he'd known your answer before you did. "Training starts Monday, 5 a.m. Loading dock of store number 1. Wear something you don't mind getting dirty." That was it. No contracts, no paperwork, just trust. Just faith in something bigger than profit margins and quarterly reports. You left the building different than you'd entered. Lighter, heavier, both at once. The weekend passed in a blur of phone calls. Your boss didn't understand. Your parents thought you'd lost your mind. Your friends asked if you'd joined a cult. How could you explain that you'd found something more valuable than stability? That you'd glimpsed a way of being that made your old life feel like sleepwalking? Monday, 4:47 a.m. You sat in the parking lot of store number 1, watching the loading dock. Workers were already moving, unloading trucks in the pre-dawn darkness, their breath visible in the cold air, their bodies moving with practiced efficiency. You'd driven past this scene 1,000 times, never stopped to think about the people who made sure the shelves were full before the world woke up, never wondered about their stories, their dreams, their children waiting for them to come home. 5 a.m. sharp. You walked to the dock. A man in his 60s looked up from his clipboard, studied you for a moment, then handed you gloves. "You're the one Margaret found," he said. Not a question. "I'm Carlos. I run the dawn shift. First lesson starts now." What followed was the hardest physical work you'd ever done. Box after box, pallet after pallet. Your soft hands blistered. Your back screamed. But Carlos taught you more than just how to properly lift with your legs. He taught you that Maria was working 3 jobs to put her daughter through medical school. That James was a former engineer who'd lost everything in the recession, but never lost his dignity. That Violet wrote poetry on her breaks and had notebooks full of verses about the beauty of ordinary mornings. "Everyone thinks the real business happens in offices," Carlos said during a water break. "But this is where value gets created. Every box we move feeds a family. Every shelf we stock serves a community. We're not just moving products. We're moving life itself." By noon you could barely stand, but something had awakened. You'd spent years in meetings discussing market penetration and consumer behavior, but you'd never understood business until you'd felt it in your burning muscles. Never appreciated the chain of human effort that made commerce possible. "Same time tomorrow," Carlos said as you limped to your car. "Unless you've had enough." You looked back at the dock, at the people still working, still lifting, still invisible to the customers who would shop in comfort later. "I'll be here." That night, you soaked in the hottest bath you could stand, stared at your blistered hands. These weren't the hands of someone climbing a corporate ladder anymore. These were the hands of someone building something else, something harder to define but impossible to ignore. Your phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Week 1 is about seeing the foundation. Week 2 is about understanding the cracks. Don't just learn the work, learn the workers. Margaret. somehow knowing exactly where you were, exactly what you needed to hear. You saved the number under a single letter, M, for mentor, for mystery, for the maybe that was reshaping your entire life. You fell asleep holding your phone, dreaming of boxes that contained dreams, of docs that launched destinies, of the strange new language you were learning, one that measured success in seen souls rather than sold units. Tomorrow would hurt even more. Your body would protest, your mind would doubt, but your spirit was finally awake, finally engaged. Finally understanding that transformation isn't comfortable, it's necessary. Week 2 arrived like a test you hadn't studied for. Carlos moved you to different positions: inventory, cleaning, cart collection in the rain. Each role revealed new people, new stories, new cracks in the system Margaret had mentioned. You met Linda in the break room at 2 a.m. She'd been passed over for promotion 17 times. They say I don't have leadership presence, she laughed, but her eyes weren't smiling. Meanwhile, I train every new manager they bring in. You watched her work, saw how employees gravitated to her with questions, how she solved problems before they escalated, how she remembered every person's name, their kids' birthdays, their struggles and celebrations. If this wasn't leadership, what was? Thomas worked security, third shift. He'd caught your attention because he was reading philosophy textbooks between rounds. Used to teach at the university, he explained. Budget cuts. Now I guard groceries and grade papers in my head. The cracks were everywhere once you started looking. Brilliant people trapped in roles that used 10% of their capacity, systems that rewarded the visible while ignoring the vital. Policies written by people who'd never worked the floor. Thursday night. You were restocking shelves when you heard crying. Found Jessica in the chip aisle, trying to calculate if she could afford dinner for her kids. She had food stamps, but they'd run out. 3 days until payday. The math wasn't working. You remembered Margaret in the parking lot. How dignity can wear any face. How struggle doesn't discriminate. You quietly paid for her groceries, helped her to her car. Didn't make it about you or your training. Just one human seeing another. Why? She asked, tears still falling. Because someone once told me that's what we're here for, to see each other. That night, you couldn't shake the feeling that something was building. All these stories, all these cracks, all these brilliant, broken, beautiful people holding up a system that barely saw them. Your phone buzzed. Another text from M. Ready for the boardroom? The shift was jarring. From loading docks to mahogany tables, from work boots to wingtips, from Carlos and Linda to executives who spoke in acronyms and analyzed spreadsheets like sacred texts. If you're still watching, if you're feeling that flutter in your chest that says this matters, then subscribe now. Share this with someone who needs to remember that business is just humans serving humans. Because what happened in that boardroom will change how you see every corporate meeting for the rest of your life. You sat in the corner, invisible, watching million-dollar decisions being made by people who hadn't touched a mop in decades. They discussed labor costs like abstract concepts, efficiency metrics that ignored humanity, growth strategies that saw workers as expenses to minimize. We could save $3.2 million by cutting overnight shifts to skeleton crews, someone suggested. You thought of Carlos, Maria, the dawn shift that made everything possible. Your hand raised before you could stop it. Excuse me. The room turned, surprised to remember you existed. I said no. Your voice steadier than your heart. That would destroy lives and ultimately destroy this company. The silence was deafening. Then, from the head of the table, a familiar voice. Explain. Margaret. Of course she was there. Of course, this was another test. But you weren't thinking about tests anymore. You were thinking about Jessica in the chip aisle. About Thomas reading philosophy while guarding groceries. About Linda training her 17th replacement. So you talked. Told their stories, painted pictures of the human infrastructure their spreadsheets couldn't capture, showed them the cracks, The waste of human potential, the cost of not seeing people. Some faces hardened, some softened. Margaret watched it all with those knowing eyes. When you finished, the room felt different, charged, like truth had entered uninvited and refused to leave. "Thank you," Margaret said simply. Meeting adjourned. As executives filed out, avoiding your eyes, Margaret approached. "Walk with me." You followed her to an office that felt more like a meditation room. Simple, calm. Photos of workers on every wall. "You see it now," she said, "not a question. The challenge, building a company on kindness in a world that rewards cruelty, scaling empathy and systems designed for efficiency. It feels impossible. It is impossible. That's why we must do it. The impossible is just the necessary that hasn't happened yet." She handed you another envelope. 6 more weeks of training. Then we talk about your real role here. But first, you need to meet someone. Someone who will show you what's possible when power serves love instead of the other way around. Inside the envelope was an address, a name, and a time. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Dr. Sarah Chen, Margaret's daughter, David's sister. The third piece of a puzzle you were only beginning to understand. Dr. Sarah Chen's office wasn't in the corporate building. It was in the community center 3 blocks from store number 7, the rough part of town, where shopping carts became homeless shelters and parking lots became battlegrounds. You arrived at 5:45. The center was buzzing, kids doing homework, seniors playing chess, teenagers shooting hoops. And in the middle of it all, a woman who looked like Margaret but moved like lightning. "You're early." "Good." Sarah didn't look up from the child she was bandaging. "Grab those boxes. We're doing food distribution in 10 minutes. No introduction, no explanation. Just work to be done." You grabbed the boxes, started unpacking. Canned goods, bread, milk, the same products you'd been stocking on shelves, but here they meant survival. The line formed quickly. Families, elderly, people who worked full-time but still couldn't afford full meals. You recognized some faces, employees from the stores, the very people who made food available for others going hungry themselves. "See the irony?" Sarah appeared beside you. "They stock shelves all day, then leave empty-handed, the system working perfectly as designed. But your mother's company pays above minimum wage. Offers benefits, does more than most, but it's not enough. Never enough when the game itself is rigged." You worked the line together. Sarah knew everyone's name, their medications, their kids' grades. She was doctor, counselor, advocate, and warrior rolled into one. Between distributions, she pulled you aside. "Want to know why Mom really started the test? The grocery walks? The invisible CEO routine?" You nodded. "Because Dad died of a heart attack in the parking lot of store number 3, collapsed carrying groceries to his car after a 16-hour shift. Nobody stopped to help. Too busy, too important. He died alone on asphalt while wearing the uniform of the company Mom would later buy." The weight of it hit you. Margaret hadn't built an empire on kindness as philosophy. She'd built it on grief transformed, on never wanting another human to die unseen. She bought the company, every share. Took her 20 years, started as that junior executive, worked every position, learned every angle. Then when the moment came, she struck hostile takeover. Except her hostility was aimed at indifference, not competitors. Sarah's phone buzzed. Emergency at the clinic. She had to go, but handed you a key. "Lock up when you're done. And think about this. Mum conquered an empire to prove a point. But empires built on points don't last. They need purpose, fresh purpose, young purpose. Alone in the center, you continued distribution, each face a story. Each story a chapter in a book about inequality, about systems that create the very problems they claim to solve. An old woman approached, bent nearly double, moving painfully. You recognized her. Mrs. Patterson, worked maintenance at store 12. Still working at 73 because retirement meant starvation. "Let me help you to your car," you offered. "Don't have one. Bus stop is just 4 blocks. 4 blocks. with 40 pounds of groceries. At 73, after cleaning buildings all day, you carried her bags, walked slowly, listened to her talk about her grandkids, her hope that they'd have better. At the bus stop, she gripped your hand. You're Margaret's new project, aren't you? She always knows how to pick them. People who see. How did you... Child, nothing happens in this company Margaret doesn't orchestrate. She's playing a long game. We all are. Building something that outlasts profit. Something that remembers people like my Harold. My husband. Died in that parking lot, store number 3. Margaret never forgot, never forgave herself for not being there. Now she makes sure someone always is. The bus arrived. You helped Mrs. Patterson board, watched it disappear into the night, stood there as truth rearranged everything you thought you knew. Margaret wasn't just running a company, she was waging a revolution, one act of seeing at a time, one transformed life at a time, one impossible kindness at a time. Your phone buzzed, text from M. Ready to learn the real business? This time, you didn't hesitate. Yes. Monday, store 47, the newest one, the laboratory, where we're testing the future. You walked back through darkened streets, past the corporate building where executives made their plans, past the stores where workers made their livings, past the places where humans made their stands against indifference. 6 weeks in, everything different, your hands calloused from work. Your heart expanded from stories, your mind racing with possibilities. What if business could be more than transactions? What if success meant everyone rising? What if power served love instead of serving itself? The questions felt bigger than you. But maybe that was the point. Maybe transformation required being overwhelmed by possibility. Maybe revolution started with refusing to accept that this was the best humanity could do. Store 47 looked like it had fallen from the future. Solar panels covered every surface. Gardens grew on the roof. The parking lot had charging stations, bike shares, and a playground. This wasn't just a grocery store, it was a statement. David met you at the entrance. Welcome to Mom's laboratory, where we test every crazy idea about what business could be. Inside defied every retail convention. Yes, there were shelves and products, but also a health clinic, a childcare center, a community kitchen, a library, meeting rooms free for local groups. It was less store, more village hub. The numbers, you asked, the old corporate reflex kicking in. Profitable from day one. Turns out when you actually serve a community, it serves you back. Who knew? David's sarcasm was gentle but pointed. He introduced you to the management team, except they weren't called managers. They were facilitators. Linda was there. The woman passed over 17 times, now running the most innovative store in the chain. Promotion? You asked her. Revolution, she corrected. Margaret didn't just give me a title. She gave me permission to reimagine everything. The next hours were a masterclass in possibility. Employees owned 40% of the store through a co-op model. Schedules were flexible, built around life instead of forcing life around work. Every worker trained in every department, creating a web of skills instead of silos. But the complexity, you started, is manageable when people give a damn, Linda finished, when they own outcomes instead of just occupying hours. You met former customers now working as nutritionists, helping others make healthy choices affordable. Former employees who'd started their own businesses, supplied by the store, mentored by the community, an ecosystem of mutual success. In the break room, though break room didn't do justice to the space with its massage chairs, quiet pods and actual kitchen, you found Thomas, the philosophy-reading security guard, now teaching critical thinking to high schoolers in the community room. Still guarding, you asked. Oh yes, he smiled. But now I'm guarding potential instead of products, much more valuable inventory. The day revealed innovation after innovation, sliding scale pricing based on income, skills training that actually led to careers, partnerships with local schools, teaching kids business through running mini stores within the store. This is incredible, You breathed to David. Why isn't every store like this? Because it requires something most businesses won't invest. Trust. Trust that employees want to excel. Trust that communities know their needs. Trust that kindness scales better than control. As closing time approached, Margaret appeared, moving through her laboratory like a proud scientist, stopping to talk with everyone, remembering details about their lives that would shame most friends, let alone CEOs. She found you in the community garden, processing everything, overwhelming, inspiring, but also, why show me this? Why the whole journey from loading dock to here? Margaret picked a tomato, handed it to you. Taste. You bit into it. Explosion of flavor, nothing like the pale imitations in most stores. That tomato was grown by Marcus, former gang member, now our head gardener. He'll tell you that soil saved his life, gave him purpose, but here's what matters. That tomato tastes better because Marcus cares, because he's growing food for his neighbors, not statistics. She paused. Let the metaphor sink in. I can build more stores like this. David can run them. Sarah can ensure they serve health, not just hunger. But we're all too old, too close to the original wound. We need someone who sees with fresh eyes, who can take this proof of concept and make it the concept you want me to. I want you to make us obsolete. To build something so obviously right that our revolution becomes evolution. To make kindness so profitable that cruelty becomes bad business. The weight of it should have crushed you. Instead, it lifted. Gave wings to dreams you hadn't dared voice. What if every store was a community center? What if every job was a calling? What if every transaction was transformation? I'm not qualified. Neither was I. Neither was the janitor's daughter who bought a company to prove love could scale. Qualification is just fear dressed in a suit. What matters is willingness to be changed by what you're changing. She stood, extended her hand. 3 more weeks of training. Different stores, different challenges. Then you decide, not whether to take a job, whether to accept a calling. You shook her hand, felt the calluses that matched your own, the hands of someone who'd touched every rung of the ladder. Who knew that the view from the top meant nothing if you climbed alone. One question, you said, the test in the parking lot. How many people did you approach before me? Margaret smiled, that knowing smile that had started everything. Hundreds, over 3 years. Do you know what made you different? You shook your head. You didn't just help. You stayed, matched my pace. Carried more than the heavy bags. You carried presence. Most people perform kindness. You embodied it. She left you in the garden, surrounded by growth, surrounded by proof that business could nurture instead of extract, surrounded by the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that you might be the one to make it normal. The final 3 weeks took you to the struggling stores. The ones in food deserts, the ones competing with dollar chains and addiction economies, the ones where Margaret's vision met its hardest tests. Store 31 sat between a payday lender and a liquor store. The manager, Jerome, had the eyes of someone fighting a war. We lose money every month. Corporate keeps us open because Margaret insists. But for how long? You worked every shift. Saw customers choosing between medicine and meals, watched employees get robbed walking to bus stops, felt the weight of systemic poverty that no amount of kindness could lift alone. So why stay? You asked Jerome one night after breaking up the 3rd fight of the week. Because somebody has to, because leaving means surrendering these people to vultures. Because Margaret pays me to be more than a manager. She pays me to be hope with a name tag. But hope was hard to stock, harder to maintain. You watched Jerome age in real time, watched good employees leave for safer stores, watched the community struggle against forces bigger than any building could contain. Then Linda arrived, brought a team from Store 47. Reinforcements, she announced. Nobody fights alone in this company. What followed was urban warfare against despair. They converted half the parking lot to a garden, started cooking classes in the deli, turned the loading dock into a job training center at night, created safe walk programs for employees. You can't solve poverty, Linda told you, but you can refuse to profit from it. You can be an oasis. You can prove that even in deserts things grow. Slowly it turned. Not profit, that would take years, but energy, community. The store became neutral ground where gangs called truce, where grandmothers taught recipes, where kids did homework while parents shopped. You were stocking shelves when it hit you, the full vision, not just successful stores in easy places, but beachheads of humanity in the hardest places, proving that kindness wasn't luxury, it was necessity. It was the only thing that actually worked. Your phone rang. Sarah. Emergency at store 19, can you get there? Store 19 burned against the dawn sky. Employees stood in the parking lot, some crying, others in shock. You found Margaret there, watching her building become ash, her face calm, too calm. Lightning strike, the fire chief explained, total loss. But Margaret was looking at her people, not her property. Anyone hurt? No, ma'am. Night crew got out clean. She nodded, turned to the gathered employees. Everyone on payroll stays on payroll. We rebuild, better, together. The crowd shifted, surprise replacing despair. In any other company, a burned store meant lost jobs. Here, it meant opportunity. You could have insured your way out, you said to her later, taken the money, moved on. Buildings can be replaced. Communities can't. Trust can't. When you commit to a place, you stay. Through fire, through everything. 3 days later, the parking lot became a temporary market, tents, tables. The community rallying, competitors donated supplies. The same employees who'd watched their workplace burn now served customers in the open air. You worked beside Maria from the dawn shift. She was training her daughter, home from medical school. Mum's store burns down, and she's still here at 5 a.m., the daughter said. That's either crazy or love. Both, Maria smiled. It's both. That night, exhausted and smelling of smoke, you found Margaret in her office. Architectural plans spread across her desk, the new store, more gardens, more community space, rising from ashes like a promise. I know what you're going to offer me, you said, and I know my answer. She looked up, waited. Yes, to all of it, to the impossible, to proving kindness scales, to making you obsolete by making your revolution ordinary. Margaret stood, walked to her window. It won't be easy, the board resists, competitors mock. Some days you'll wonder if we're fools dreaming of a world that can't exist. And the other days you'll know we're the only sane people in an insane system. Building the world that must exist. She turned back. Extended an envelope, your official offer, not a job description, a mission statement. Vice President of Human Possibility, the title they'd create together. Your first assignment, take everything you've learned, everything you've seen, turn it into a playbook, make it teachable, scalable, undeniable, show the world that seeing people isn't just nice, it's necessary. You signed without reading the salary. It didn't matter anymore. You'd found something worth more than money. You'd found purpose. You'd found your place in a revolution disguised as a grocery chain. 1 year later, you stood in the parking lot of Store 47, Tuesday, 3 p.m., watching an elderly man struggle with his groceries. Without thinking, you walked over. Let me help you with those. He looked up, surprised. Grateful. You loaded his car in silence, matched his pace, carried more than bags, carried presents, just as Margaret had taught you. Thank you, he said. You don't see kindness like that much anymore. You do here, you replied. It's company policy. He drove away, never knowing he'd just met the person responsible for transforming how the company hired. For the empathy training now mandatory for all positions, for the See People First initiative that had increased both employee satisfaction and profits by 30%. Your phone buzzed. Message from Linda. 3 more stores had hit profitability using the Community First model. Thomas had started a philosophy program that was reducing employee turnover. Sarah's clinics had prevented over 1,000 medical bankruptcies, but the real victory was smaller, quieter. It was Carlos still running the dawn shift, now as a partner owner. Mrs. Patterson finally retired with dignity. Jerome's store becoming the heart of its neighborhood's renewal. Margaret found you there, same parking lot where it all began. Both of you different now. Both of you exactly the same. Any regrets? She asked. Just one, that it took me so long to understand what you were really teaching me. Which was that success isn't climbing above others. It's lifting as you climb. That power isn't control. It's creating conditions for others to discover their own power. That business isn't about transactions. It's about transformation, she smiled. That knowing smile, but now you understood what she knew. The secret that turned grocery stores into gardens, that turned jobs into journeys, that turned companies into communities. The secret was simple. See people, not positions, not problems, not profits. People. See them fully. See them first. See them always. Ready for phase 2? Margaret asked. What's phase 2? Other industries. Other companies. The revolution spreads or it dies. We've proven it works in groceries. Now we prove it works everywhere. You thought about all the invisible people in all the buildings in all the cities, all the brilliance buried under indifference, all the problems that would solve themselves if we just saw each other. Let's change the world, you said. No, Margaret corrected. Let's remind the world what it was always meant to be. Human, connected, kind. Let's make business boring by making it good. You stood together in that parking lot. CEO and protege, teacher and student. Two people who'd found each other in the most ordinary moment and turned it into something extraordinary. The sun was setting. Somewhere, someone was struggling with groceries. Someone was working invisible. Someone was waiting to be seen. And somewhere, maybe in this very chain, maybe in another, someone would stop, would help, would see. The revolution didn't need armies. It needed eyes, open eyes, willing hearts, helping hands. It needed people who understood that the future of business wasn't artificial intelligence. It was authentic intelligence. The intelligence of the heart. Margaret walked to her car. Same modest sedan, same worn coat, same woman who'd built an empire on a simple principle. What you see, you can save. What you save, saves you back. See you tomorrow, she asked. Every tomorrow, you promised. She drove away. You remained, watching the parking lot, watching for the next moment, the next person, the next chance to prove that kindness wasn't naive. It was necessary. It wasn't weak. It was the strongest force in the universe. Your phone buzzed. An unknown number. Someone had carried someone else's groceries. Someone had been seen. Someone wanted to know more about this strange company where humanity came first. You smiled. Typed back, "Let me tell you about the day I helped a stranger with her bags and how it changed everything." The revolution continued, one parking lot at a time, one human moment at a time, one impossible kindness at a time, until impossible became inevitable, until kindness became common, until every business remembered it was just humans serving humans. And it all started with 4 words. Let me help you. Sometimes the smallest acts write the largest stories. Sometimes a moment in a parking lot reshapes an empire. Sometimes seeing one person teaches you to see everyone. What will you see today? Who will you help? What revolution will you start with your simple, radical act of being human? The choice is yours. The moment is now. The person needing to be seen is closer than you think. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, share your own story of being seen or seeing others, because this isn't just content, it's a movement, and movements need movers. This channel is for those who believe business can be better, who know success means everyone rising. who understand that the future isn't in artificial intelligence, but in authentic connection. See people. It changes everything.